The sky over Asheville that afternoon was the kind of soft blue that makes you forget people can be cruel. You'd think sunshine and champagne would keep the darkness out, but betrayal doesn't need bad weather, it only needs a stage. My name is Miles Harrington, and the moment that ended my marriage didn't come in a flurry of screams or a tearful confession at midnight. It arrived dressed in celebration, cloaked in gold light and expensive toasts, on a rooftop filled with people who thought they knew us. We were gathered for Sierra, our daughter, our pride, the anchor Delilah and I had held on to longer than we held each other. Her graduation day. A pinnacle. I'd helped plan every detail, the floral arrangements and school colors, the curated playlist, even the scalloped napkins Delilah insisted on. I wasn't expecting gratitude, but I damn sure wasn't expecting betrayal to be served before dessert. 50 guests circled long tables, clinking glasses and laughing, oblivious to the crack forming in the concrete beneath my life. I sat at the center, smiling like a man who still believed the ground was solid. I should have seen it coming. There were signs, Delilah's distant eyes, the way her laughter no longer reached her chest when I spoke, the subtle glances she exchanged with Jasper Creed. I chalked it up to midlife drift, the kind of current every marriage sails through. But some currents don't pull you back to shore. Some sweep you out and leave you gasping. Delilah stood up. The chatter dimmed like a curtain dropping. She raised her champagne flute, elegant as ever in her cream dress, hair pinned in that deliberate, effortless way that made people mistake her control for grace. A toast, she said, and the clinking resumed as glasses lifted toward her. I looked up from my plate, wondering if she was going to embarrass Sierra with a long sentimental speech. Instead, she cleared her throat, smiled, and detonated. I've decided to start a new life without you, she said. Just like that. No build-up, no preamble. The words hung there, absurd in their naked finality. At first, I thought maybe I'd misheard. But when Jasper shifted slightly beside her, and their fingers brushed, just for a second, but long enough, I knew I hadn't. Silence. Someone's fork hit their plate. A nervous laugh fluttered near the bar but died quickly. All eyes turned to me. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I did what 26 years of marriage had trained me to do. I stayed composed. 1,000 thoughts flickered across the back of my eyes, but only one surfaced. You've prepared for this, Miles. I stood up slowly, smoothed my jacket, and pulled the envelope from my coat. It was a heavy one, legally and symbolically. Cream-colored, matching the napkins she'd chosen, as if to say, I planned this moment too. I placed it beside her plate. I didn't shove it. Didn't make a scene. Just laid it down like a quiet final move in a long, rigged game. For later, I said softly. She looked confused for a moment. Of course she did. Delilah had always been the type to control the script. The idea that I'd flipped to the final page without her knowledge must have stunned her. Her fingers curled slightly, as if tempted to open the envelope right there. But I didn't wait for the aftermath. I turned to Sierra. Her eyes were wide, confused, and far too young to be witnessing the end of a family like this. I leaned in and kissed her forehead, whispered just enough into her ear to keep her grounded. I'm proud of you, I said. No matter what. Then I walked out. No dramatic exit. No slammed doors or shouted accusations. Just the quiet shuffle of a man reclaiming his story. My footsteps echoed across the rooftop tile, and I didn't look back. Let them whisper. Let them stare. Delilah had chosen her audience. She wanted a performance. What she didn't expect was that I had my own finale. The elevator ride down was the first breath I'd taken in what felt like months. I exhaled slowly, the kind of exhale that comes when you've been holding in your voice for too long. The steel walls reflected back a man I barely recognized, tired, maybe, but not defeated. Not anymore. I stepped out into the parking garage and let the sunlight hit me again, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was living someone else's story. I slid into my car, adjusted the rearview mirror, and stared at my reflection. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just nodded once. Because this wasn't grief. It wasn't even anger. It was clarity. 3 moves ahead, that's how I lived the last year. While Delilah planned her public swan dive into someone else's arms, I'd been setting the stage for something she didn't see coming. My trust had been paper-thin for a while now. Her secrets weren't all that secret. Her girls' nights that ended at 2 a.m., the careful deletion of messages, the perfume that lingered too long on unfamiliar shirts, I had noted every detail. Not because I needed proof for my pride, but because I needed leverage for the future she thought she could steal. And now, with one toast, she'd handed me everything I needed. I turned on the engine and drove away from the rooftop, away from the applause that had curdled into confusion. I didn't even check my phone. I knew it was lighting up, texts, missed calls, maybe even a photo or two from stunned guests. Let them have their drama. The real show had already begun. She thought she'd caught me off guard. But what she didn't understand, what Jasper couldn't possibly grasp, is that you don't blindside a man who's already lived through the betrayal in silence. You don't shake a man who spent every quiet night sharpening the blade he'll never have to swing. That envelope was just paper. But to her, it would feel like thunder. And me? I was already gone. Delilah had always been the composed one. That was her signature. She knew how to wear grace like armor, knew how to enter a room and command attention with just the right amount of polish and restraint. Even back in college, she had a kind of presence that made people stand up straighter around her. I was the quiet type, the one who built things slowly, ideas, routines, futures. She was the energy. I was the foundation. It worked, or at least it looked like it did. Until I realized I'd been building a home for someone who had quietly packed her bags long before I noticed. I met her sophomore year. She was leaning over a railing outside the student union, arguing about a Toni Morrison quote with some philosophy major. I stood there too long listening before I finally said something that made her laugh. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was damn close. I fell fast, and I fell deep. She liked that I was focused. Said I gave her peace. She had grown up in a loud household, and I was the stillness she craved. I, on the other hand, was drawn to her light, her ambition, her effortless ability to convince people they belonged, even when she herself wasn't sure where she fit. I started my real estate firm the year after graduation. It was just me, a second-hand desk, and a whole lot of cold calls. Meanwhile, Delilah stayed home with Sierra once she arrived. She said she wanted to be present for every moment of our daughter's childhood. I believed her. Back then, I believed everything she said. I thought we were partners, not just romantically, but practically. I didn't just love her. I respected her. That's the part no one talks about. How much it burns when someone you respected turns out to be a stranger. Over the last year, though, things started to shift. Not all at once. Delilah didn't work that way. It was subtle. Quiet silences where there used to be late-night talks. Spa weekends that popped up more frequently. A vague distance in the way she hugged me, like she was checking out of a role she hadn't yet quit. I kept telling myself it was just a phase. Long marriages go through seasons. Maybe she just needed time. Space. I gave it to her gladly. I backed off, made her tea in the evenings, scheduled her massages for her birthday. I didn't push. I didn't pry. I waited. Then came the jacket. Jasper Creed's tailored blue blazer. I recognized at the moment I saw it draped across the back of the chair in our laundry room. Jasper and I go back over a decade. We played squash together every few months, met for drinks a few times a year. He and his wife came to our 20th anniversary party. He was one of those friends you never got too close to, but always nodded at across rooms. A man with an easy smile and a sharp tongue. I never fully trusted him, but I never imagined he'd end up in my house, hiding behind Delilah's perfume. I stared at that blazer for a full minute, every part of me fighting the urge to make excuses for her. Maybe he dropped it off. Maybe she borrowed it. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then she came home that night, humming to herself as she kicked off her shoes in the foyer. I said nothing. I watched her. She moved through the kitchen like she owned the silence. Later, as we lay in bed, she turned her back to me and fell asleep without a word. That's when it happened. She murmured his name. Not loudly. Not with guilt, just a soft, unconscious breath. Jasper. And that was it. Something broke in me. Not like a plate smashing against a wall, but like a slow crack through concrete. Long, inevitable, and final. I didn't wake her. I didn't ask questions. I didn't shout. I simply opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, letting the truth settle over me like a second blanket. I knew from that moment I wasn't living with my wife anymore. I was living with a character she'd crafted. And I knew her next act wouldn't be small. That's when I began documenting. I didn't tell a soul, not even my best friend, Charles, or my assistant, Mara. I just started gathering. Receipts, phone records, password attempts. I logged the burner Venmo she thought was clever. The late-night Lyft rides back from his apartment downtown. I printed everything. I created a private cloud folder and backed it up on a physical drive in my office safe. Not because I was bitter. but because I wasn't going to let Delilah rewrite the story. I also stopped reacting. That was key. If I played the role of clueless husband, she'd get bolder. And she did. The lies got sloppier. Her spa days became yoga retreats. She started wearing new perfume. I even watched her once, through the upstairs window, practicing what looked like a speech in front of the mirror. She was rehearsing. And knowing Delilah, she was planning to debut that performance in the most public way possible. I smiled when I realized that. It was so her. Everything about her life had to be curated, beautifully packaged. Her betrayal would be no different. And I would not interrupt her. No, I would give her the stage she wanted. Then I'd take a bow of my own. So, I began building my side of the chessboard. Hired Clara Minen, the kind of forensic accountant who could find a breadcrumb in a forest fire. Then Malik Sloan, a divorce attorney with the voice of a preacher and the soul of a predator. We worked quietly, efficiently, surgically. They were shocked by how much I already knew. I told them I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for control, and I was going to take it back without raising my voice once. The hard part wasn't collecting the evidence. It was sleeping beside her every night after I knew the truth. Watching her lie to me about Jasper's charity events. Watching her look at Sierra with that same maternal warmth she used to save for me. I didn't feel hatred. I felt something worse, disappointment. That was the hardest pill to swallow. Not that she cheated, but that she orchestrated it like a play, thinking I'd be too slow to notice. That she looked at 26 years and thought she could outmaneuver them with a toast and a pretty dress. But the woman I married? She underestimated one thing, me. And that would be her final mistake. Delilah never cared much for numbers. Budgets made her sigh. Bank statements bored her. Any time I tried to walk her through our investments, her eyes glazed over by the third line. She trusted me with the finances, called it my domain, and I let her. Not because I wanted control, but because she didn't want the responsibility. It was always easier for her to live in the story than to understand the structure behind it. That was our dynamic for years. She charmed, I calculated. She dreamed, I delivered. And so, when the time came for her to plot her great escape, she forgot that numbers don't lie. And I never stopped watching them. I kept things quiet. Smooth. No flags, no alerts. When I noticed irregular transfers, 300 here, 700 there, I didn't say a word. I let them stack. I knew she had Jasper's help. He was the type who thought himself above consequences. He had that arrogance of men who'd skated through life on charm and hollow victories. He probably told her she deserved more. Told her to drain the joint account in pieces so it wouldn't trigger the bank. Clever in theory, but not clever enough. I froze the line of credit she thought she was bleeding. I did it during a trip she took to Charleston, one of those self-care weekends, where she posted beach sunsets and captioned them with quotes about freedom. While she drank rose on a boat deck, I met with Clara Minen in my office downtown. Clara wasn't just a forensic accountant, she was a bloodhound in heels. Sharp, thorough, relentless. She had once tracked a $2.3 million offshore account that a hedge fund partner tried to hide in the Cayman Islands. I told her I needed eyes on every dollar Delilah touched. Discreetly, I said, "Of course," she replied without blinking. We started small. Her nail salon's sudden surge in gift card purchases. The travel expenses that didn't match the calendar on her phone. A second phone bill under a name I didn't recognize, Melissa Carver. A name Delilah used at a spa she frequented. Clara pulled screenshots of Venmo payments linked to that alias. Notes like room key kiss mark and thanks for the wine. My stomach turned, but I didn't let it show. This wasn't about emotion anymore. This was war by precision. Then came the Savannah condo. It was a vacation property Delilah and I had purchased years ago, back when we still believed in getaways and new memories. She always said it would be her writing space, her sanctuary. Truthfully, she visited more often than I did. And according to Clara, those visits had been ramping up lately. When I checked the records, I found recent renovations, expensive ones. New floors, modern fixtures, the kind of updates you don't make unless you plan to live there or impress someone else. So I acted. I bought out her half of the property. Quietly. Legally. The deed transfer was buried in a batch of routine documentation filed by my firm's real estate arm. She didn't notice. She never noticed when the paperwork looked dull enough. Clara double-checked every transaction. I moved the condo into a holding trust with my name as sole beneficiary. She thought she had a nest to fly to. She didn't even realize the nest belonged to me again. But I wasn't done. I needed a legal shield. That's when Malik Sloan came in. Malik looked more like a jazz musician than a lawyer. Smooth suits, quiet voice, the kind of gaze that saw everything. But he had teeth. He built his reputation on winning impossible divorce cases. When I handed him the file Clara and I had compiled, he didn't ask questions. He just nodded. "You want revenge?" he asked me once. "No," I said. "I want peace. But I won't beg for it." Malik drafted a motion for exclusive property control, citing her deceptive transfers as financial misconduct. We started building a timeline. Texts, call logs, cash withdrawals. Jasper's fingerprints were all over it. Malik even found out Jasper was still legally married. Apparently, Jasper's wife had been quietly documenting her own war. Malik reached out to her attorney. We traded notes, formed an alliance. That's the part Delilah and Jasper never considered. How betrayal builds bridges between the betrayed. We prepared everything for the day she'd make her move. I knew it would be public. Delilah needed an audience. She needed a moment. So I let her have it. While she planned her big declaration, I signed a post-nuptial agreement enforcement letter and filed for dissolution of marriage based on infidelity. It included an affidavit, signed, notarized, time-stamped, detailing everything we'd uncovered. And I wrote her a note. Just a few lines, in my own handwriting. Something quiet. Something final. A show deserves a curtain call. Consider this yours. I folded it carefully and tucked it into the envelope with the rest of the documents. Clara and Malik reviewed every word. We rehearsed the sequence like a scene. Because that's what this was, wasn't it? A scene she thought she had written. But the script had changed. The closer graduation day came, the calmer I became. That's how I knew I was ready. I stopped checking her location. I stopped watching for signs. I just let her drift further into her illusion. She would walk into that celebration thinking she held all the cards. She didn't know I'd built a new deck. What struck me most during those final days was how unaware she was. She hummed while cooking, still used my name when talking to Sierra, still kissed my cheek absent-mindedly. Maybe part of her believed I'd crumble, that I'd break in front of everyone. But what she didn't realize was that I'd already done my breaking in silence, in private, in the hours spent staring at her back as she slept, knowing I was no longer in her dreams. The moment she stood up to deliver that toast, I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel sadness. I felt release. Like watching the final piece of a long plan click into place. Her hand brushed Jasper's under the table. She thought that was her boldest move. She had no idea what bold really looked like. Because while she was rehearsing a speech, I was preparing the final act. Not with venom, not with rage, but with numbers. And numbers never lie. Sierra's name echoed across the rooftop like a benediction. Summa cum laude, the announcer said, beaming. Our daughter stepped forward in her crimson gown, eyes bright, smile shy, the kind that still made me catch my breath. My hands came together instinctively, clapping with a father's pride, not a husband's pretense. For the last 26 years, I had given everything I had to two things, my marriage and my daughter. One failed me, the other saved me. That day was Sierra's. The sun poured over the rooftop, casting gold on her hair as she posed for pictures with her classmates. Delilah had chosen the venue, always partial to high spaces, places with views and chandeliers, and just enough distance from real life to pretend. I let her take the reins. I wanted no part of the spectacle beyond Sierra's smile. That was enough. The tables were set in neat rows, draped in white linen, the silverware polished to a shine. Glasses glimmered. Waiters in black vests weaved through the crowd like chess pieces, always moving, never speaking. There was laughter, some tears, mostly from proud parents. Sierra floated between conversations, gracious and grounded, her mother's poise and my steadiness stitched into one person. I sat at the head table, a silent observer, nursing a single glass of champagne. Delilah hovered like a hostess, all light touches and practiced smiles. You'd never guess she was planning her liberation between sips of sparkling wine. Her dress shimmered with tiny gold sequins, tasteful but noticeable. Jasper Creed wasn't far. He stood a few feet from the bar, surrounded by a half-circle of sycophants who mistook his charisma for character. I watched him the way a hawk watches a rabbit trying to strut. He leaned toward Delilah every so often, close enough to be conspiratorial, but not enough to alarm the crowd. Cowardice wore nice shoes that day. I wasn't surprised when Delilah stood. I saw the toast coming the way a storm announces itself in the distance. I just didn't know how loud the thunder would be. May I have your attention for a moment? She called out, her voice melodic, steady. The kind of tone she used when she wanted the room, when she wanted control. Glasses lifted. Conversation stopped. Even Sierra paused mid-laugh, eyes turning toward her mother with that flicker of anticipation only children can give. Delilah held her champagne glass high. Her smile widened just enough to be dangerous. I want to thank you all for coming today to celebrate Sierra, our brilliant, beautiful graduate. You've watched her grow into an extraordinary woman, and we are so proud of her. Applause swelled. I joined in. My daughter deserved that. Delilah's eyes scanned the crowd like a performer who knew her timing. And, while this day is about new beginnings for Sierra, it's also, for me, a beginning of sorts. The air changed. I've decided, she said, to start a new life without Miles. There it was. Her voice didn't crack. Her hand didn't shake. She said it like she was announcing a move to a new city or starting a book club. Just a casual detour. Oh, and by the way, I'm detonating my marriage in front of your friends and family. I heard the gasps, the forks clinking against porcelain, the awkward coughs and murmurs. But it all sounded distant. I was looking at her face. That carefully composed mask. Next to her, Jasper's smug little grin flickered briefly before he looked down, pretending to be bashful. Their fingers brushed under the table. A subtle, coward's touch. All eyes turned to me, expecting a reaction. A scene. A meltdown. They got a smile. I stood up, slow and deliberate, as if I were giving her a standing ovation. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the envelope, cream-colored, thick, warm with my palm's heat. I laid it beside her plate. Her eyes dropped to it and stayed there. Her hand didn't move. For later, I said quietly. Jasper looked up, confused, slightly off balance. That pleased me more than I expected. I leaned down to Sierra, kissed her on the forehead. I'm proud of you, I whispered. She stared up at me with wide, searching eyes. I gave her a smile, not wide, not fake. Real. Just enough. Then I walked out. The music didn't start again. Not right away. The silence lingered, heavy and awkward. A few people cleared their throats, others looked down at their phones, pretending not to be part of it. The toast had landed like a grenade, but the shrapnel hadn't hit me, because I'd already left the battlefield. As I descended the stairs, I heard someone say, "Did she really just?" And another person shushing them. Let them talk. Let the story spread. I didn't need to explain myself. The envelope would do that for me. I reached my car in the underground garage and took a breath. Not a sigh of pain. A release. I sat for a moment, hands on the wheel, eyes closed. In the silence, I could still hear the clinking glasses, her voice. A new life without Miles. She said it like a victory. But I'd already stolen the win. She didn't know it yet, but that was her peak. That moment, that toast, that shimmer of power. Everything after would be the descent. Upstairs, they were still reeling. I didn't have to see it to know. Jasper shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Delilah glancing at the envelope, pulse rising, wondering what was inside. Sierra trying to hold it together. The band softly beginning to play again, desperate to return things to normal. But nothing would be normal again. I drove away slow, no music, windows down. Asheville's breeze felt lighter than usual, or maybe I just felt lighter. I didn't check my phone. I didn't need to. I knew she'd open that envelope before dessert. I knew she'd read every word. And I knew, without a doubt, that no matter how calm she looked on the outside, the inside of her world had just collapsed. The toast was hers. But the checkmate? That belonged to me. By the time I reached the edge of town, I knew exactly how the rest of the evening was going to unfold. Delilah would wait. Not long, though. She's never been the type to let curiosity sit. She'd wait just long enough for the clinking glasses to die down, for the champagne to start tasting bitter, and then, when Jasper leaned in to ask what that envelope was, she'd open it. And that's when the real toast would begin. I turned off my phone the moment I got into the car. Not just airplane mode. Off. Entirely. I didn't want the vibrations, the texts, the missed calls. I didn't need to hear it happen in real time. I already knew. That envelope was a scalpel, carefully assembled, precisely folded, clean and deliberate. I wasn't trying to humiliate her. I was giving her truth, raw and undiluted. Everything she had tried to choreograph in whispers and shadows was now printed in black and white, bold and inescapable. Inside the envelope, first, a copy of the divorce filing, cleanly typed, signed, and time-stamped. There would be no mistaking the seriousness. No, let's talk this out. No, you misunderstood me. No escape hatch. Just the first official nail in the coffin of the life she tried to script without me. Next, a signed affidavit of her infidelity, supported by a carefully curated series of screenshots, texts, DMs, payment receipts, even a hotel concierge confirmation from the night she told me she was staying late at the spa for a couple's facial. I never said a word then. I waited, documented, and now every quiet lie sat in that envelope like tiny grenades waiting to be read. Then came the motion for exclusive property control, an airtight case built on the back of her financial deception. It outlined every attempt she made to siphon funds, including the transfers she'd routed through that fake Venmo account she thought I'd never discover. Clara and Malik had cross-referenced them with timestamped ATM footage and hotel receipts. Every number was accounted for. Every shadow she'd hidden in was exposed under fluorescent legal light. After that, the voided trust transfer. The retirement fund she believed she could split with me once this was all over? Locked. Invalidated. Reassigned. The paperwork bore my signature and that of the trust manager, filed 3 weeks before the rooftop declaration. She thought she'd start a new life on my dime. She was wrong. And last, folded carefully on top of everything else, was the note. My handwriting. Just one line. A show deserves a curtain call. Consider this yours. I imagined her reading that last. I imagined her face hardening, trying to process the quiet precision of what had just happened to her. Because that envelope wasn't revenge, it was choreography. It was restraint. And in that moment, I'd given her something she never gave me. The truth without the performance. An hour passed. I sat on the balcony of a small rental I'd checked into the night before. Just a simple place overlooking the woods. Nothing grand. Just clean air and silence. I'd arranged everything. Keys under the mat. Groceries in the fridge. No one knew I was there. It was the first time in months I wasn't pretending. I poured a drink, nothing heavy, just a splash of bourbon over ice, and leaned back in the chair. The air smelled like pine and fresh soil. Somewhere down the hill, a creek whispered. The world kept turning. Then my phone lit up. It was Sierra. Just a text. One line. Mom just screamed so loud the waiters dropped a tray. I stared at the screen, then smiled. Not because I wanted her in pain, but because the noise meant the silence was finally over. She'd finally heard me. For months, I lived in restraint, letting her lie, letting her plan, letting her erase me slowly with manicured fingers and curated excuses. Now, in one moment, the mask had cracked, and it hadn't happened behind closed doors. It happened in front of all the people she tried so hard to impress. That screen? That was her mask breaking in real time. I didn't reply to Sierra. Not yet. I didn't want to taint her experience with my explanations. That day was still hers. And if I knew my daughter, she was watching everything unfold with a level of awareness Delilah had always underestimated. Sierra had inherited more from me than Delilah liked to admit: patience, strategy, stillness, and chaos. She'd connect the dots on her own. She already was. Another 30 minutes passed. The sky was turning to ash blue, stars trying to blink their way into existence. My bourbon glass was nearly empty when the phone buzzed again. This time it was Charles, my oldest friend. What the hell just happened? The text read. I didn't answer him either. Let them wonder. Let the story fill the gaps. Delilah had started this in a crowd. Let the crowd witness the fallout. She had planned the performance down to the stemware. She didn't expect the script to flip. And what about Jasper? I could picture him sitting stiffly in his seat, probably trying to whisper some meaningless reassurance while Delilah's fingers fumbled through the documents. He never had the stomach for discomfort. I bet he couldn't even look at her once the screenshot surfaced. I bet he started to feel the heat crawling up his spine when she reached the part about the retirement fund. I bet he understood, for the first time, that she wasn't leaving a broken man. She was leaving a man who was already gone. Delilah would rage. That much I knew. She'd probably stand, slap the envelope down, accuse someone of betrayal. Maybe she'd call it a setup. Say I manipulated the timing. But none of it would matter. You can't argue with court filings and account statements. You can't spin away screenshots. Not even Delilah could charm her way past numbers and signatures. And most of all, you can't argue with silence. I never screamed. Never begged. Never even accused her. I just prepared. And tonight, preparation won. I stood up from the chair and walked inside, shutting the balcony door behind me. The bourbon still lingered on my tongue, warm and slow. I turned off the lights, letting the soft glow of the moon pour across the wooden floor. Somewhere behind me, my phone buzzed again. I didn't check it. There would be more texts, more questions, maybe even an email from Delilah once she calmed down or tried to. But I didn't need to hear her version anymore. That envelope was my final word. Clean, sharp, quiet. It said everything she didn't let me say. And it said it better. They came home that night, Delilah and Jasper. I heard the car before I saw it. Her Lexus, the one I bought her for our anniversary 2 years ago. She pulled up the driveway like nothing had changed, headlights casting long shadows across the lawn. The same lawn I'd mowed every Saturday morning for years while she sipped coffee on the porch and reminded me not to miss the corners. The same driveway she used to wave at me from with a smile that made the neighbors think we were solid. But that night, everything about the way those headlights parked told me she was still clinging to the illusion. I was waiting, not behind the door, not in the shadows. I was sitting on the couch in the foyer, tie loosened, drink in hand, boxes stacked neatly by the front entrance. Her life. Labeled. Condensed. Clean. I didn't throw anything. I didn't destroy. I packed. Her shoes. Her spa kits. Her monogrammed silk ropes. Even the yoga mat she kept in the back seat of her car but hadn't used in months. Jasper's cologne was the first thing I smelled when the door opened. Delilah stepped in first. She looked around like she didn't recognize the place, as if the air had changed in her absence. Maybe it had. Or maybe it was just the fact that, for once, she didn't control the moment. Jasper trailed behind her, his confidence shrinking by the second. You blindsided me. Delilah snapped the words at me, her voice pitched just high enough to break the quiet. In front of our friends, our daughter, God, Miles, what the hell were you thinking? I stood up slowly, not defensive, just centered. Calmness is a weapon most people never learn to use. I looked at her the way you look at a storm through glass, close enough to see the chaos, far enough not to drown in it. I was thinking, I said, that honesty deserved an audience. Her eyes flared. Jasper shifted his weight, still pretending to be relevant in the room. You could have talked to her in private, he said, trying to add something, anything, to tilt the power dynamic back his way. I turned to him, met his gaze, let silence stretch long enough to strip him of whatever mask he thought he had left. You mean like the private conversations you've been having in my home? I said. The ones where you use her initials as the gate code on your Tesla? That night ring a bell? Jasper looked like someone slapped the breath out of him. His eyes darted toward Delilah, who was already reaching for one of the boxes, as if that could give her something to hold on to. Something solid. But the truth was, she'd lost her grip the moment she stood up at Sierra's celebration and thought her performance would go unchallenged. We're staying in the condo, she said suddenly, her voice low, eyes fixed on the box in her hands. At least for now. No, you're not, I replied. She froze. What? I own the condo, I said. You'd know that if you checked the deed. Or the paperwork. Or, I don't know, your email. It reverted to me 3 weeks ago. Clara made sure of that. She looked at Jasper again, like he was supposed to fix it. Like he had a magic string of words that could unravel the reality I'd constructed while she was busy rehearsing her freedom. He said nothing. That was the moment he realized this wasn't a love story. It was a cleanup job, and he didn't bring gloves. You can't do that, she muttered. That's not fair. I live there. You forfeited fair when you brought him into our house, I said. The words weren't angry. They weren't even bitter. They were final. That's what caught her off guard more than anything. Not my fury, but the lack of it. She expected me to break. She wanted rage. Maybe even tears. But I was already gone. What she was speaking to was the memory of me, the version she used to manipulate, dismiss, and speak over. That version was dead. She just hadn't attended the funeral yet. Jasper tried one last time. You're going to ruin her. I laughed. Just once. Sharp. Low. She did that on her own, I said. You helped, of course. But make no mistake, this wasn't a trap. It was an unveiling. He turned toward the door, as if somehow escape would preserve his ego. Delilah stood still, one hand on the box labeled Bathroom, Master. Her nails were still painted champagne pink, a detail I noticed only because it matched the tone of the toast she gave before detonating our marriage. I almost admired the consistency. She looked at me then, not with anger, with something closer to confusion. Like she couldn't understand how the man she thought she could outmaneuver had gotten so far ahead of her. You were always so calm, she said. I thought. I know, I cut in. You thought I was asleep. But I wasn't. I was watching. The silence after that line was heavier than any fight we'd ever had. I walked past them both, opened the door wide, and gestured to the driveway. "The boxes are yours," I said. "Everything else stays here." She moved slowly, as if gravity had tripled. Jasper followed without protest. I didn't slam the door when they stepped out. I closed it gently, soft enough for them to hear it, soft enough for it to echo. I stood there for a long time after they left, listening to the stillness. It wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was the beginning of it. I turned off the foyer light, walked back to the living room, and poured a drink. I didn't toast to anything. I didn't need to. Because that scream from the rooftop? It wasn't the climax. It was the prelude. And the real silence, the kind that follows a collapse, that was just beginning. The thing about small cities like ours is that nothing stays private for long. Word spreads faster than truth, faster than intention, faster than the people it involves can even brace for it. So, when Delilah tried to control the narrative, I almost admired the effort. Almost. She started with the usual tropes. He was cold. He wasn't present. We grew apart. Whispers in yoga classes, over lunch with the bored ladies, inside boutique salons with low lighting and high prices. I could imagine her pausing dramatically over her mimosa, brushing invisible lint from her blouse while sighing. It just stopped feeling like love. The irony? She was describing herself, not me. For a while, I let it play out. I didn't respond. I didn't post. I didn't push back. That silence wasn't weakness, it was patience. Strategic, deliberate patience. Because I knew something she didn't. People talk. Especially when they've been watching quietly from the sidelines. Especially when they realize the version of you they believed in was nothing but good lighting and a borrowed personality. The first real shift came when Jasper's wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, spoke to the Herald Tribune. Not just spoke, gave a full statement. Her name was Valerie Creed, and unlike Delilah, she didn't wear her rage in pearls and silk. She weaponized it. The article dropped on a Monday morning like a brick through stained glass. The headline was tame, behind the smile, a closer look at Jasper Creed's double life. But the content? Explosive. Valerie didn't hold back. She spoke about how Jasper had become distant, secretive. How he started withdrawing money from their joint accounts and staying out late. But the kicker? She revealed texts Delilah had sent to him. Texts where they joked about the clueless spouses, where Delilah referred to our marriage as a corporate agreement gone stale. My favorite line? Miles won't do anything. He's too polite to cause waves. That one made me laugh. The article included a grainy photo of them together, Delilah and Jasper, outside a downtown hotel, clearly unaware of the camera. It wasn't scandalous. They weren't kissing, but they weren't hiding either. And when you're the president of a local charity board and the face of a community wellness campaign, that photo carries more weight than any affidavit. Delilah's narrative began to crumble. Slowly at first, then like plaster peeling off wet walls. It started with silence. Her phone stopped ringing as often. Her emails from the foundation she chaired went unanswered. The gala committee she once ruled with soft manipulation suddenly held a meeting without her. And then, the most telling sign, Sierra stopped answering her calls. That part hit her harder than I expected. She tried everything, texts, voicemails, guilt-laced messages sent through mutual friends. But Sierra? She held firm. I never asked her to choose. I never even mentioned the fallout. She simply watched, observed, understood. "I need to talk," she said. "I don't," I replied. She took the glasses off. Her eyes were tired. Not puffy, not weepy, just exhausted. Like someone who'd finally realized the play had ended but stayed on stage hoping for an encore. "People are turning on me," she said. "Our friends." "Our friends." I cut in. "You mean the ones who nodded along while your fingers brushed Jasper's under the table? The ones who smiled at me with pity in their eyes, pretending not to know? You can keep them." She opened her mouth, closed it. Then, quietly, "You always knew, didn't you?" I nodded. "I always knew." That ended the conversation. I went back inside. She stood there in the lobby for a while. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Her performance was finally over, and the crowd had left the building. In the weeks that followed, I focused on Sierra. Not because she needed rescuing, she didn't, but because I wanted her to see something different. A man who didn't fold. A father who didn't beg. We started having dinner once a week at a small Thai place near her new job in Atlanta. She'd tell me about her work, her new apartment, her coworkers. And sometimes, between bites of curry, she'd bring up her mother. She told Aunt May that you manipulated everything, she said once. I looked up. Do you believe that? Sierra smiled. No. I saw how you waited, how you didn't react. That told me more than anything. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Some truths don't require repeating. Around the same time, I got a call from a nonprofit focused on helping men navigate betrayal and high-conflict divorce. They'd read about the case. Some of the court filings had been leaked, someone with a grudge, or maybe a misplaced file clerk. Either way, the nonprofit wanted to partner with someone local, someone who'd been through it and come out intact. I agreed. We started small, an evening class, once a month, in a modest community center. 10 men the first night. All different ages, backgrounds, stories. But the same look in their eyes, the one I used to see in the mirror. I didn't tell them every detail of what I went through. Just enough to show them it was survivable. That silence could be power. That strategy beats chaos. Delilah faded slowly from the community spotlight. Her public statements became rarer, more defensive. She released a half-apology video on Instagram, too little, too late. Her comments section turned cold. What was once filled with, "You're an inspiration," became a graveyard of disbelief and disappointment. Meanwhile, I moved into a penthouse above my firm. It wasn't lavish, nothing Delilah would have picked. Clean lines. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A quiet view of the city I rebuilt myself in. I slept better there. Worked later. Woke up with clarity. I wasn't happy, not exactly. But I was at peace. And in this new chapter of my life, that was enough. Because while she tried to turn the world against me, I stayed still. And in that stillness, they saw the truth for themselves. There's something oddly quiet about courtrooms. Even when people talk, the air feels like it's holding its breath. The walls are beige, the lighting unforgiving. The chairs just uncomfortable enough to remind you that nothing about justice is meant to be easy. I'd sat in plenty of rooms like this in my line of work, contract disputes, zoning appeals, the occasional commercial arbitration. But sitting across from Delilah, with attorneys and evidence between us instead of wedding rings and shared dreams, was something else entirely. She walked in late, dressed in a soft gray pantsuit, makeup done to perfection, hair pulled back like she meant business. But I saw it, just behind the gloss and smooth posture, a flicker of panic. This wasn't the stage she preferred. There were no adoring guests, no toasts, no flattering lighting. Just court documents, transcripts, and the low rustle of attorneys flipping pages like death by 1,000 cuts. Her lawyer was young, maybe late 30s, the type who built her brand on social media, sharp blazers, soft-focus Instagram reels with captions like "Protect your peace, sis," and "Know your worth in court and in life." I wasn't worried. This wasn't a workshop or a brunch seminar. This was law, and law deals in evidence. Malik Sloan, my attorney, didn't do social media. He didn't do small talk either. He sat beside me with a leather-bound folder, a legal pad, and a silver pen. That was all he needed. When the judge entered, everyone rose. I glanced at Delilah. She didn't meet my eyes. That was new. The proceedings began simply. No fireworks. Just procedural matters. The clerk confirmed the filings. The judge, an older woman with decades in family law etched into the lines on her face, scanned the room slowly like someone who'd seen every version of this story and was already bored by ours. Delilah's attorney went first. She launched into a speech about marital fatigue, emotional neglect, and a deeply felt need for independence. She made it sound noble, even tragic. I almost applauded the creativity. She said Delilah had supported my career for years, kept our home in order, made sacrifices. Some of that was even true. But then she claimed Delilah had no knowledge of the financial shifts, freezes, trust revisions, asset protection. That's when Malik leaned forward. "Your Honor," he said, calm and steady, "will be presenting documentation that demonstrates not only awareness, but active attempts by the petitioner to conceal transactions from the respondent. We also have a signed postnuptial agreement, filed and notarized, outlining asset division in the event of infidelity, which, we'll prove, occurred." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Infidelity clause?" Malik nodded and handed her a file. The courtroom went still as she flipped through it. Line after line. Dates, screenshots, transaction histories. It wasn't just damning, it was surgical. Delilah's attorney tried to object. "These texts could have been altered." "They weren't," Malik replied. "And we've included metadata and carrier verification." The judge didn't even blink. "I'll allow it." Delilah shifted in her seat. Her hands, which used to gesture with effortless confidence, now fidgeted with the hem of her blazer. Jasper sat at the back of the room. I noticed him as soon as we walked in. No wedding ring. No smile. He looked like someone trying to disappear into the wood paneling. I didn't acknowledge him. He'd already taken enough space in my life. The judge asked a few clarifying questions. Malik responded with precision. Then came the matter of property division. Delilah's attorney pushed hard, claiming equal stake in the business, partial rights to the penthouse, even a percentage of the consulting revenue I'd only recently started drawing from. But Malik was ready. Per the clause outlined on page 14, he said, handing another document forward, Ms. Harrington forfeits claim to business assets due to personal misconduct and active attempts to hide financial activity. As for the penthouse, it was purchased post-separation using earnings clearly marked as non-marital income. The judge nodded. And the retirement fund? Previously contested, Malik replied, but now voided due to deception and verified misuse of marital funds to support an extramarital relationship. Delilah's face changed then. Not anger. Not even shame. Defeat. The judgment was swift. House mine. Investments, 70-30 split, in my favor. Business, entirely untouched. She got a small alimony window, 12 months. And only because Sierra was still on my insurance until her employer plan kicked in. The judge even commented, dryly, I would advise the petitioner to refrain from public commentary while matters are still legally active. A warning, thinly veiled. When it ended, no one clapped. There's no applause in a courtroom, even when you win. The gavel hit once, and that was it. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked past Jasper on my way out. He didn't look up. I stepped into the sunlight and exhaled. I hadn't realized how long I'd been holding my breath. The courthouse steps were quiet. No paparazzi, no reporters. Just me, Malik, and the quiet buzz of resolution. She'll appeal, Malik said calmly. They usually do. Let her, I replied. She already lost the part that mattered. He nodded once. You handled it well. I didn't answer. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt finished. That night, I sat on the balcony of the penthouse, city lights flickering like a distant tide. I poured myself a drink, no bourbon this time, just water with a slice of lemon. My reflection in the window looked like someone I used to know. Worn, but standing. Changed, but not broken. Delilah would go home to a smaller place, a quieter phone, a circle of friends half its original size. And Jasper? I suspected he was already mapping out his next move. Men like him don't stay still. They pivot. They charm. They repeat. But me? I wasn't repeating anything. The chapter was closed. Not slammed. Not torn out. Just closed. Neatly. Permanently. 2 weeks after the hearing, I got the news over coffee. Jasper was gone. Not dead, not disappeared, just gone in the way cowards go, quietly, without confrontation, without accountability. According to Valerie, his soon-to-be ex-wife, he'd moved back into his brother's place in Savannah. To salvage what's left of his life, she told me in a message that was more observation than update. There was no satisfaction in her tone, just finality. The kind of exhausted relief that settles in once the storm is over, and all you're left with is wreckage and silence. He didn't say goodbye to Delilah. Didn't leave a note. No, we'll get through this, or sorry you lost everything for me. Just vanished. It would have been funny if it weren't so predictable. I imagined her waking up in that echo of a condo, realizing the person she'd dismantled a family for was already choosing distance. I could almost see her face. Panic first, then confusion, then that forced calm she used to wear when the world cracked in ways she hadn't choreographed. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. She was living the consequence of her own illusion, and that's the most poetic kind of justice. Later that week, she sent me an email. Not long. Not angry. Just rambling. No apology. No, I'm sorry for what I did. No ownership of what she set in motion. Just regret. The flavorless, cowardly kind. Regret that she got caught. Regret that it didn't play out the way she'd hoped. Regret that the curtain fell before she could exit with dignity. She wrote things like, I didn't plan to hurt you like that. I thought I deserved a different life. I just wanted to feel something again. I read it once. Then I closed my laptop. There was nothing in her words that required an answer. No truth, no accountability. Just a woman trying to rewrite a script that had already played out. She wasn't talking to me in that email. She was talking to the version of me she wished still existed, the one who would fold, who would offer her grace she didn't earn, who would make room in the narrative for her redemption. That man was gone. Instead of responding, I called Sierra. She picked up on the second ring, her voice light. I could hear street noise behind her, traffic, maybe the sound of someone laughing. She was walking somewhere. Hey, Dad. Hey, sweetheart. Just wanted to check in. You caught me on my way to lunch. You have 3 minutes. I laughed. I'll be quick. How's work? She launched into a rundown of her latest project, an urban redevelopment plan for a struggling neighborhood in Atlanta. It was ambitious and deeply rooted in community, the kind of work that used to make me believe in something beyond profit margins. Her voice lit up as she spoke, confidence threading through each sentence like steel beneath silk. And then, out of nowhere, she said it. Mom called again. I didn't interrupt. Just listened. I let it go to voicemail, Sierra continued. She said she misses me, that she feels alone. Do you believe her? I asked. A pause. Then, I think she misses the version of me who didn't question her. I let that sit for a moment. My daughter had grown up so much in the past few months. She wasn't just surviving this, she was evolving through it. I'm proud of you, I said, for seeing it clearly. I learned from the best, she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. After we hung up, I sat in my office by the window. The city moved quietly below me. The people, the cars, the lives all unfolding on their own timelines. I felt no anger, no sorrow, just space. Space where her noise used to live. And in that space, something else was growing. Clarity. Direction. A steadiness I hadn't felt in years. I didn't block Delilah. Not on email. Not on my phone. I didn't have to. She had blocked herself from me, from Sierra, from the truth. There was nothing left for her to destroy, and nothing I needed to guard anymore. That's the thing about fire. Once it burns everything, you stop fearing it. I went back to my work. I had 3 new projects moving through development, 2 residential builds, and 1 commercial property aimed at small business startups. But more than that, I'd started meeting again with the men's group I'd helped found. Fathers, husbands, professionals who'd been blindsided by betrayal and didn't know where to put their pain. Every Tuesday night, we sat in a circle of mismatched chairs and talked, not like victims, but like men rebuilding the blueprints of their lives. There was Marcus, whose wife ran off with his law partner. Eli, who hadn't seen his kids in 3 months. Jared, who found out about the affair when his wife's lover left his toothbrush in their guest bathroom. They weren't weak, just wounded, trying to make sense of the silence. I told them pieces of my story, never everything, but enough. Enough to show them that dignity could live inside the collapse. That sometimes walking away wasn't weakness. It was power. Measured. Quiet. Controlled. Delilah became a footnote. Not a scar. Not a shadow. Just a lesson I no longer had to keep relearning. Every now and then, I get a text from someone who hadn't heard the full story. A cousin. An old coworker. They'd ask, what happened? And I'd just reply, life. Because that's what it was. A chapter. A fall. A recovery. And now? Now I was free. 6 months after the rooftop toast that split my life into before and after, I stood in front of a circle of folding chairs at a community center on the south side of town. Nothing glamorous about it. Gray walls, scuffed floors, coffee that tasted like burnt rubber, but it felt more honest than anything I'd stood in front of for the last 2 decades. No suits, no pretense. Just men. Worn men. Men with rings and drawers and silence on their phones. Men trying to find their footing again. We met once a month. Not therapy, not officially. Just a space. A container for stories most people didn't want to hear because they didn't know what to do with them. Betrayed husbands didn't make headlines unless they snapped. And most of us didn't snap. We just unraveled. Quietly. Slowly. All while holding doors open and paying mortgages and nodding through dinners with people who thought they knew what marriage meant. I'd started the program with a guy named Theo, a father of 4 who'd lost custody of his kids when his ex lied about a restraining order. He didn't want revenge. He wanted dignity. And that's what we built. A space where you could say, I miss her, and I hate her, and not be judged for the contradiction. Where you could admit you stayed too long, gave too much, ignored the signs, because hope has a way of sounding like logic when you're in love. Tonight, the chairs were full. 11 men. Some new. Most regulars. We didn't always talk in circles. Sometimes it was just one story. One confession. Tonight, That confession was mine. I used to think love was about sacrifice, I said. About showing up no matter what. About swallowing your pride because marriage was bigger than ego. Heads nodded. I stayed low. No one interrupted. And then one day, in front of 50 people, at my daughter's graduation celebration, my wife toasted to her freedom and announced she was leaving me for a man I once called a friend. Someone let out a slow breath. Not surprise. Recognition. I didn't scream. Didn't curse. I handed her an envelope with divorce filings, documentation, and a note. Then I kissed my daughter on the forehead, and I left. I let the silence stretch. I used to think walking away meant you lost. That the louder person won. But now I understand something I didn't back then. Silence can be strategy. Clarity doesn't always need an audience. After the session, a young guy named Marcus, barely 30, still shell-shocked from being left with a 2-year-old and a mortgage, came up to me. "Thanks for saying it like that," he said. "Everyone acts like men should either forgive or explode. No one talks about just surviving it." I nodded, clapped a hand on his shoulder. "Survival is a win," I said. "And building something after? That's the real flex." Later that weekend, Sierra came to visit. She knocked on my door at noon, wearing jeans and a cropped sweater, hair pulled back in a messy bun that reminded me of her childhood. She didn't text ahead of time. Just showed up with 2 coffees and a grin. "You busy?" "Not anymore," I said, letting her in. We sat by the window in my living room, looking out over the skyline. She always liked that view. Said it made the city feel like it had secrets. We didn't talk about Delilah for a while. Just caught up. Work. Friends. A date she was excited about but pretending not to be. Then, out of nowhere, she said, "I never realized how much Mom controlled the narrative." I looked at her. "Most people don't," I said, "until they write their own." She nodded slowly, chewing her lip. "I used to think you were passive, that you didn't fight hard enough. And now I see you were fighting a different war. One that didn't need yelling." That meant more than I had words for. Before she left, she walked over to the bookshelf in my office and pointed at a small wooden box. "What's this?" I smiled. "Open it." She did. Inside, neatly folded and preserved, was the envelope. The one I gave her mother. The one that carried the weight of my silence and the sharpness of my strategy. The one that cracked the mask Delilah wore for years. Sierra read the top of the handwritten note and looked back at me. "You kept this." I nodded. "Not as a trophy. As a reminder." "Of what?" "That endings don't always come with closure. Sometimes they come with clarity." She placed it back inside gently, as if it were more fragile than it looked. That night, after she left, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. Not to admire, not to mourn, just to see, really see, the man who came out the other side of a life he once thought was permanent. I wasn't the same. My smile didn't come as easily. My eyes were sharper. My posture less eager to lean in. But I wasn't broken. I was rebuilt. The kind of man who knows his worth without needing applause. Who doesn't fear solitude. Who walks into a room not asking to be seen, but bringing vision with him. The kind of man who doesn't hand out keys to people who love temporary things. They say freedom looks like flight. But for me, it looked like stillness.